Micah Parsons just the 7th best edge rusher in the entire NFL? I swear, man, these narratives are getting completely out of control. Let's get to it. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central. And in the meantime, catching up with you guys with these quick hitting videos. By the way, I am back from vacation, so tomorrow night I will be seeing you live, and daily videos are back too, so I'm excited about that. But today, July 10th, ESPN gave us the show, right? Because they put together these annual edge rusher rankings that they do, and they do every position, by the way, where they get the input from coaches, executives, and scouts. So what they do is they hand out these ballots, and everyone fills them out from number 1 all the way down through number 10. So you get some players that go unranked, you get some players that are ranked number 1 in each list, and you know, they form a consensus afterward. Micah Parsons got, let's call it a fair ranking, or in the fair range, right? He was ranked number 3 in the NFL overall consensus. Somebody, though, ranked him 7th best in the NFL. That was his lowest ranking at edge rushers, which, let me just say, is insane. Like, there is absolutely no way that there are 6 better edge rushers than Micah Parsons in the NFL today. I understand some that you might want to rank above him. I don't understand having 6 guys in front of him. I think at that point, you just want to stand out some way, somehow. ESPN does offer a couple of quotes that might give you an idea as to, you know, one of those 2 guys had him at number 7, right? Just based on the negative quotes, but we'll get to that in a moment. I just wanted to take the chance to really dive into how ridiculous the whole Micah Parsons narrative has gotten. Because I understand the whole discussion about the podcast. I understand not being happy about how vocal he might be when he speaks to the media. I understand that the Malik Hooker interaction, right, on Twitter was a little bit weird. I don't think it was ideal, right? I would struggle to put on a straight face and be like, man, all of that is fine. Nothing happened. It is at least something, right, to have Malik Hooker go on social media and be like, hey, man, focus on the game, right, because we're getting slashed in the running game. I'm not saying Malik Hooker in itself, I'm not saying he was right to make that statement, because obviously the secondary struggled as well. But just in general, I wouldn't hide all of that, but I also wouldn't take it to the point where it's like, oh, Micah is an issue and he's got to go, right? The Cowboys shouldn't pay him when the moment comes. I think that is insane talk when you're talking about a player that is looking absolutely like a generational talent, you know, in the sense that the guy is special, right? He's been 3 years in the NFL. Each of them, he's found himself in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. And at least 2 of those 3 years, he's had an argument to win the whole thing, right? He's had an argument to be named the Defensive Player of the Year in each of those 3 years. But sacks are king, and that's been mostly his undoing. Not so much last year, because he had the same number of sacks as Myles Garrett did. But Micah Parsons is one of the best players in football, and at some point, you got to stop overthinking it. The Cowboys should absolutely pay him. He's a game changer, and he's special in a unique way in that, sure, you can make the argument that Myles Garrett is better, but Micah is such a unique challenge because of the speed element, how athletic and versatile he is. He just brings some stuff to the table that others don't, right? It's like with the wide receivers, we can talk about Justin Jefferson versus CeeDee Lamb, and we can talk about them being better than Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill has like this very unique style that makes him an even more complicated headache to deal with. So if that makes sense to you, that's what I mean with Micah Parsons being unique in that sense. I think there are several things that have become pretty ridiculous at this point. One of them is the fact that somebody would put him at number 7 based on some of the concerns that are put out there. And I'll talk about that in a minute here. Just let me share the the screen a little bit. So these are some of the quotes, and I'm not sure you can see it very well. Let me actually zoom in a little bit more. I don't care if it's all zoomed in. Someone says, an NFL coordinator here on the ESPN article, which you can check out, obviously, on their website, his issues are really more in the run game than anything else. That might be a little bit of a fair criticism just because of the size, right? Micah is absolutely undersized when compared to other edge rushers around the NFL. But then there's this quote, and I don't know about this one. So a veteran NFL defensive coach, that's how ESPN names the quote-unquote source. If you put him at outside linebacker all game, right, in the same traditional spot, and think on the edge, right, I'm not sure he would have the same production. He needs to be moved around, in my opinion, but he's so good in that role that he completely wrecks a game. I don't know about this one. I'm not going to lie. Because here's my logic, first and foremost. We've seen Micah beat top NFL tackles on the edge consistently without being moved around. Now, credit where credit is due. Dan Quinn did a fantastic job getting Micah freed up and giving him one-on-one looks. But at the end of the day, that is not a con for Micah. That is just Dan Quinn doing what he could do with such a talented player. But that shouldn't be held against Parsons. If you're giving that input and that is your excuse to put him at number 7, like, I don't know if he would do this at edge rusher when he has consistently proven that he can, I don't think that's a fair reason to put him at number 7. Now, ESPN doesn't specify that this is the guy that put him at number 7, but quite honestly, if I had to put my money on somebody, it would be the guy saying that he doesn't know if he would be a top-tier edge rusher, having that kind of production if playing specifically at edge. Now, I'll turn the page here, though, a little bit quickly here, and I'll move on to one of the biggest criticisms for Micah, and that is, does he show up late in the year, and specifically, does he show up in the playoffs? And a lot of people love to bring up the Green Bay Packers game. There might be, up to a certain point, a fair element to that discussion. I also think that if you look at the film, the game plan from the Packers was pretty solid in how they were going to attack Micah, and they did it successfully. They executed it, and then no one else helped out Micah, and the entire team played very poorly, including Dak Prescott, including CeeDee Lamb, including the entire team. Everyone not named Jake Ferguson played like crap on that particular game. So you can still have like that argument that, hey, he didn't do anything in the postseason. But I also think you cannot deny that Micah gets that kind of stuff held against him more than, say, Myles Garrett, who absolutely did nothing against the Houston Texans as well. Now, I absolutely respect Myles Garrett. I think he's the one guy that would make me think twice when asked who is the best edge rusher in the NFL. I think it comes down to Micah and Myles. I don't think TJ Watt is better than Micah. I don't think Max Crosby, who he's pretty good, though. He might be in that discussion as well, but I wouldn't put him above Micah. The one guy I would consider putting above Micah, and I believe that I do, at least for now, is Myles Garrett. But Myles Garrett can have a piss-poor performance in the postseason, and it doesn't become like this big-time criticism as it becomes with Micah. And I don't know if that has to do with the star on the helmet that Micah wears, or does it have something to do with the fact that Micah is much more vocal, so people are more likely to be like, yeah, boo Micah, right? Instead that, as opposed with like Myles Garrett, who basically just sticks to football maybe a little bit more than Micah does, who has his own podcast, who likes to, wage some wars on social media every now and then, including against ESPN, and we'll get to that in a moment here. But yeah, listen, I don't think it's that fair of a criticism to be like, oh, Micah stunk it up in the playoffs. He sucks now. He shouldn't be paid. I think that's a little bit of crazy talk, honestly, if I'm being real with you. Now, regarding the two guys that are above Micah on this list, again, Myles Garrett, I get it. And by the way, he got 70% of the first place votes from coaches, executives, and scouts, which I thought was impressive. had 14 sacks, same as Micah in 2023. So why do we live in this world where, but Micah doesn't get the sacks? That's that criticism, man. You hear it from a lot of people, a lot of Cowboys fans, a lot of NFL fans, NFL media. You hear it pretty consistently. I mean, I kind of get basically drooling over TJ Watt's stat sheet, right? When he had 19 and a half sacks last year. And then that happened after 2 years of having 22 and a half sacks, I think it was. Yeah, when he tied the regular season record. But Myles Garrett had 14 last year. And he doesn't get the, I don't want to say hate, but he doesn't deal with all of those question marks that Micah seems to do. And that's another example why I think the narratives are getting pretty ridiculous at this point. Because it's not only that Myles Garrett had the same number of sacks as Micah did, which even I was impressed at remembering today when I was getting my notes together. But Micah Parsons literally had, and this is denoted by ESPN on their article actually, had a higher pass rush win rate, 5% higher than anybody else at the position across the NFL. And he had the most double teams that he faced, 167, according to ESPN. Micah had an issue with that. I thought it was funny. Man, sorry about that. I don't know what that was. Apologies. But Micah took issue with that, right? With the whole Micah Parsons, with the whole double team thing. Because he said there's no way it was 167 double teams. Maybe 500. MF can't F with me, man. It's up this year on Mamas. 2 weeks. So Micah went off a little bit on Twitter/X. I will say I don't agree with Micah's numbers here. I know double teams are very open for interpretation, right? And not everyone will have the same number of double teams for every player when looking at an entire season. But he had 513 pass rushing snaps per Pro Football Focus. So Micah is absolutely on the exaggeration side of things on this one. He did not have or face 500 double teams. It's likelier than not that ESPN is up to a more accurate number in that sense. But Micah did have a more fair comment when he tweeted this out. Most double-teamed player, but I have the best pass rush percentage and most pressures. And then they say the production is low. Something is not adding up. Now, I think that is fair from Micah. Absolutely, I do. Because people like to hyper-fixate on sacks the same way that they do touchdown interception ratios with quarterbacks. When that represents such a low number or such a low percentage of the plays that you're trying to evaluate. Micah, according to ESPN, forced the most incompletions because of his pass rush across the entire NFL. So when you look at EPA, for example, I know there's been some studies made on this, and like 5 pressures equals more or less a sack. And I know they can change games. I know they feel different and they feel more exciting, but evaluating pass rushers shouldn't stop at sacks. But even then, it feels kind of wrong the way that voters around the NFL are fixating on sacks and just the way that the media kind of treats differently Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons because of the numbers of sacks that they get when they got the same number in 2023, I think. And they both sucked a little bit in the playoffs. They both got beaten, at least, in the playoffs because Myles Garrett could not beat Laramie Tunsil in the postseason. I'm just going to give you an idea here. 14 sacks divided by 513 pass rushing snaps. That is what PFF calculates for Micah. That's 2.7% of the plays that you would be evaluating. So what matters more, right? And this is just pass rushing snaps, by the way. I filtered out the run defense and the coverage stuff. 2.7% of the time, Micah Parsons got a sack. And he had 14, which is a pretty decent number. So should we really be putting so much focus on that? Or should we be looking at pressures, forced incompletions, pass rush win rate, and of course the double teams element where you've got teams hyperfixating on blocking number 11 and basically being vulnerable elsewhere because of the resources being invested on stopping Micah or slowing him down. So as you can see, this is more or less kind of like a venting show where I'm looking at a player that over the first 3 years of his career, he's had 13 sacks in each of those years, something that was only done by Reggie White before him. And yet we're treating him like this player that doesn't get the production, this player that doesn't care, that he's quitting on the team in the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. And it just seems to me that none of these storylines actually make sense. And yeah, I'm trying to bend here, trying to make it clear that these are getting utterly ridiculous and trying to change that a little bit. Micah is still one of the best players in the NFL. The Cowboys should absolutely pay him. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree or disagree? It's a no-brainer when the moment comes. The Cowboys should make Micah the highest paid defender in the NFL, and we can forget about every other idea that is being thrown out there. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like the show, hit the thumbs up for me, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll be live on the show here on ADZ Sports Dallas Primetime. And as always, have a good one. Bye-bye.